What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today giving you my Super Wildcard Weekend review. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, hit that like button, it would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more football content in your life, just hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, most importantly, join me down below for a football conversation in the comment section, right? Maybe you're a fan of these teams, tell me your initial takeaways, or maybe you're just a football fan and want to share some of your thoughts from Wildcard Weekend. Do you like the 7 seed that's kind of a hot topic right now, or maybe you just want to hone in on a specific game? Love to talk football with you, whatever you want to talk about. I'm here for a conversation down in the comments section. A little bit different than how I normally do my Tuesday videos, but obviously less games to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to try to not linger on one game too long, but maybe the first game of the weekend was maybe the best. 49ers Cowboys kind of had its own flavor there, but Raiders, Bengals, congratulations, Bengals fans, first playoff win in 31 years. You'll see some of my takeaways on the screen, and we'll start with, the last one. Is this the most resilient football team of all time? I'm pretty young, so, my collection database on resilient football teams might be lacking compared to some others, but I mean, to go through the Gruden, Ruggs, Arnett, even, Hobbs a couple weeks ago, a guy has a potential DUI situation on his hands. This Raiders team just overcame so much for them to be in the playoffs and, down to the wire, had a chance to force overtime with that last possession. And even in this game, right, down a couple scores, worked their way back, and again, one play away from forcing overtime. I mean, really impressive what this team has been able to do all year long, and I really don't think that can be overstated. That said, Mike Mayock was fired yesterday. Makes it a little easier, I think, to move on from Rich Bisaccia, especially considering he didn't win this game. I think if he wins this game, you got to give him the job. But now, new GM coming in, probably a new head coach. What do you do with Derek Carr? He's super cheap contract next year. Maybe you use that so you can foster another young quarterback in the draft. I don't know. A lot of options for this team and a lot of directions they can run, but ton of resiliency. And I think a lot of that reflects on how Derek Carr is as a leader and some of the other team captains in that locker room. Some of my other big takeaways: Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase is getting Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams level of unstoppable in regards to their chemistry, especially with the implementation and the adding of that back shoulder throw into what they already do with Jamar Chase. So early on, some of my worries about this Bengals offense and why Jamar Chase was getting so much love was big plays, right? We all love big plays. I'm here for it, and I'm glad he's that guy for this offense. But as the year went on, and even in this game, they used him a ton as an intermediate weapon and as a yak guy. And it's not quite as much as Devontae Adams is for the Packers, but they're adding that wrinkle into the offense. So they're adding some more diversity there, and the late hands from Jamar Chase on those back shoulders makes it impossible for a DB to see the ball coming and to defend it, right? So it's getting unguardable in a lot of ways, given you add the back shoulder throw on top of what this offense already has, and the chemistry between these two. It's a thing to behold. And then Mike Hilton and Hunter Renfrow. How about this? A couple of slot specialists, right? I don't think either one would really make a full NFL living as a boundary player at their respective position, but as slot specialists, they're two of the best in the biz, and this matchup was a ton of fun to watch. Hilton won a couple of their matchups. Renfrow got a couple of wins against Hilton, so it was evenly battled there, and nothing crazy there, but it was just cool to see the slot corner specialist against the slot wide receiver specialist, and those two just duke it out from that spot. So a lot of fun there, and again, congratulations Bengals fans. If you're a Raiders fan, you guys did a whole lot with what was going on around, and now you have a chance to pivot in another direction, and maybe it's for the best. Next game on Saturday was not quite as fun. Probably the best game we've seen from the Bills all year long, and maybe the best Josh Allen game we've seen all 4 years of his career, or a best Bills game under the Josh Allen era. If you have a great memory of every game that Josh Allen's played in his 4 years as a career, let me know if you think this is the best. But there's not much the Patriots could have done to really keep up with that good of a Bills team. The offense was playing like it was ready to win a shootout, and the defense is ready to win a defensive stalwart. So that makes it pretty tough to compete in and of itself. And then the game script was perfect for the Bills. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better start. Get up 7-0, and then the Pats' ensuing possession is picked up by Micah Hyde. Unbelievable play. Get in the back of the end zone, and Nelson Aguilar is trying to catch it, as a deep receiver normally does, just catch it in a basket as opposed to going up and getting it. And Hyde covering the ground gets to it first, and Hyde points it, comes away with the pick, and then after that, another score for Buffalo. Pretty sure they scored on every offensive drive, a touchdown on every offensive drive, which obviously impressive. And this was just a dominant showing, and the game script didn't help New England, and it wasn't advantageous for Mac Jones, who I don't think played terribly, but definitely took a step back from where he was, maybe midway through the season, where, it was pretty clear he was the best quarterback. I still think he had the best production of any rookie quarterback, but you could also just say he was the first rookie quarterback to give you starter level play, right? Because Wilson struggled a ton. Lawrence didn't have a great situation around him. Didn't get to see Trey Lance much, and then Justin Fields had a really rough situation around him too. So maybe it was just Mac Jones was the first rookie quarterback to play competent football, and because the other four were not, we overpriced that. And the last takeaway, this was a game where the Patriots could have used a legit number one, right? Like a Garrett Wilson in this year's draft, or maybe if they splurged and got Kenny Golladay. I know he wasn't great this year for the Giants, but this was just a game where it became pretty evident, right? Throughout the year, they've done a good job. Kendrick Bourne has some big games, and you see Nelson Aguilar, the tight ends, find the end zone, and they've been able to piece it together. But this was a game where it was like, man, if you had a legit number one wide receiver going up for that pass as opposed to Nelson Aguilar, maybe he high points it and he, changes the game because it's 7-7 as opposed to 7-0, about to become 14-0. So on top of that, the Bills defense just was able to shut down all those weapons, right? They just didn't have anybody getting open for New England. So definitely a tough way for the Pats to end their season, but still think there's a lot of promise. And obviously having quarterback on a rookie-controlled, cap-friendly deal makes it a lot easier to continue to be a competitor. And then for the Bills, this is what you wanted, right? And now you got the Chiefs next week. So, again, exactly what you want. Then we're on to the Sunday slate. Another not fun game to watch. The Buccaneers, despite, the pre-existing injuries, and then, Tristan Wirfs, Ryan Jensen get banged up. Hopefully, if you're a Bucs fan, Wirfs plays next week. But I don't know. That's getting... I'm not entirely sure if they're down him with the Rams coming into town with Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, and Aaron Donald. We'll talk about them in a minute. That's tough. And if Jensen's not playing 100% in front of Aaron Donald, that's worrisome. But all that to say, this game was over from the start. It felt like the Bucs were clearly the better team in this game. So really good sign if you're a Bucs fan, if you're Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, that, hey, even at 100%, not at 100%, I should say, we can blow out a handful of good teams in the NFL, because the Eagles are not bad by any stretch. Yeah, they're the 7th seed, but over 500, and the Bucs made it look simple. So this was a bad game, that said, for Philadelphia and for Jalen Hurts. This is one of those games where, because it's the last taste in your mouth, I think there's going to be a lot of rumblings about them potentially moving on from Jalen Hurts. And I get that. And if there was a guy in this draft, or if, Russell Wilson's like, Philadelphia is where I want to go, Aaron Rodgers says, I want to go to Philly, then yeah, pull the trigger. Don't be afraid to get better at that spot. Obviously, it's the most important position in football. You got to get better there if you can. But I just don't see it in this QB class. I don't see those veterans wanting to go to Philadelphia. I still think they're a year or so away from being serious contenders. So why not take advantage of Jalen Hurts on his cheap contract, second round player? And on top of that, look at the opposite, right? If Hurts was, as opposed to getting better in the regular season, disappointing in the playoffs, if it was the other way around, you'd have Taylor Heineke on your hand, who the Bucs beat in the playoffs 2 years ago in the wild card round, right? Came in off the streets, nobody knew anything about him, and then he plays pretty well against the Bucs in the playoffs in the wild card round. And next thing you know, it's, hey, why don't you just give Taylor Heineke the job? Fitzpatrick's down, let's roll with Heineke. Let's see what he does. And thanks for subjecting me to watch that all year long. For the most part, it was not pretty. So it's one of those things where, based off how we saw it play out, from good getting better to then terrible, it doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence in Hurts. But if it was the other way around, I think there would be people glamoring, saying, hey, maybe you got something in Hurts. So I think the best play, and from an organizational standpoint, is just roll with the cheap guy for another year. Hope he keeps getting better. I've been relatively impressed with Hurts. When he was at Alabama, when he got to Oklahoma, got a lot better as a passer. From Oklahoma to his rookie year, got a lot better as a passer. And then from last year to this year, I think he showed a whole lot of growth. So I'm still not completely over Jalen Hurts. I don't think he'll ever be an elite quarterback. But, while he's cheap, I think you can build a nice cast around him, use those 3 first-round picks, boost up the wide receiver core and the defense. I think you got a good opportunity to be a serious, maybe deep playoff contender next year, or if not next year, in 2 years, when you're on that last year of the Hurts deal. Next game on Sunday was one I think nobody is done talking about. 23-17, Niners come away as the only road team and only underdog to win this weekend. So pretty impressive stuff there. Let's start with Debo. I mean, this picture goes hard, but also, Debo is just unbelievable. They didn't even have to use him a whole lot as a receiving option. Brandon Ayuk really kind of had that covered. But when it comes to just getting this guy in space, it makes me think of high school football, or maybe even a step below that, like Pee Wee football, where you could just watch the game and see who the most athletic guy on the field is. And it feels like that's what the 49ers are just trying to do with Debo, which, in a playoff situation, get your best players the football. And if you can do it in space, fantastic. If not, try to have them create it. And Debo does a little bit of both. So, dude's been unbelievable. This is a point that you've heard 1,000 times. I'm not going to harp on it, but he's been special. This game should have been a blowout. After that Debo touchdown makes it, 23-6, 23-7. This shouldn't have been a conversation. And if it turns into a blowout, I wonder what the conversation, the rhetoric around this coaching staff really turns into. Because then I think there's even more heat on Mike McCarthy and less on Kellen Moore, though the offense was flat, and that's part of the reason they were down, 20 some odd points to that point in the game. But then Jimmy Garoppolo happens, and this game kind of highlights the risk you take by having a guy like Jimmy G as your quarterback, where he's not elite. He is prone to mistakes, and he can cost you one, even though you've been the dominant team for every minute up until that point in the game. So something to monitor. Granted, this is a Dallas defense that's pretty good at creating turnovers. So maybe take it based off the matchup. That said, his pick, it's just back-to-back overthrows, and one landed in the hands of a waiting Cowboys DB. So not like Dan Quinn schemed anything crazy up there. And then the Cowboys coaching, Dan Quinn, no fault. I mean, I think nothing wrong with what he did this past weekend, but Mike McCarthy coming under a ton of heat, Kellen Moore too, and now Jerry and Stephen Jones have a tough decision on their hand, because I think Dan Quinn gets a head coaching job. This game probably hurts Kellen Moore's stock. He had an interview with the Vikings like a day or two before this game, and I have a hard time thinking people look at this game, look at the QB draw, the 14 seconds left. Yeah, it was it could have worked. Maybe if Dak slides a little earlier, right, recognize where he's on the field, or if they have a couple more seconds, or if the ref's quicker getting the ball, whatever the case may be, maybe there's a situation where that ends up working. But it didn't feel like the right play, honestly. Just take a couple shots. You're a team that's built to, win with your wide receivers, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Even without Michael Gallup, you still have two of the, one of the best duos in football. So, kind of an interesting call there late in the game. But Mike McCarthy might have just coached his way out of a job with game management stuff, going for it on fourth down. Loved that, and then they go no huddle and then squander that. It results in a delay of game. It was just weird in general. And for a guy whose job is to manage games, he doesn't necessarily do it well. Think back to the Chargers game week 2 earlier this year. I think the Joneses are going to come to a decision where maybe Kellen Moore does get a head coaching job, and they're forced to basically match and out McCarthy, up Moore, or maybe even the same thing with Dan Quinn. Who knows? I don't think that's out of the question either. So, yeah, really disappointing way for the Cowboys to end their season. And, I think Jerry Jones is onto something. He sees this team as his next version of the triplets, right? And Dak, in a lot of ways, makes me think of Aikman a ton. And, Zeke, when he was drafted, was, crowned the next Emmitt Smith. And then you have this wide receiver room that includes CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. And you had Michael Gallup. I know he was hurt this year, but Cedric Wilson's a fine number 3. And then you have the tight ends, Tony Pollard, too. I mean, a lot of weapons to lose in the first round at home. Tough scene. Plus what this defense did, getting so much better, and Micah Parsons, falling into your lap, and he becomes the best defensive rookie in football and defensive player of the year candidate. So, yeah, I understand where Jerry's upset, and I don't necessarily agree with a lot of things he says, but this time, I'm right there with him. This was definitely disappointing to see the Cowboys end their season right here when, at points in the year, they look like a team that could make it to the Super Bowl. Final game on Sunday, we won't talk about this one long. This one was just brutal to watch. I mean, the Steelers were fortunate to get 21 points in this game, and it's basically because the Chiefs started coasting on defense at the end of the game. But, this is what we would have expected. I had Chiefs minus 20 hit, which was pretty exciting. But Chiefs looks as comfortable on the offensive side as they have all year. They're feeling comfortable with those 10, 12, 15 play drives using Hill and Kelsey as their check down options. I also think they're getting more out of guys like Mecole Hardman as a yak player, Brian Pringle, if I could spit that out, in the same role. And they're just finding ways to get most out of them. And this looked like a team, and Pittsburgh's got a good defense. Maybe they just don't match up well against the Chiefs. But this looked like a game where you did see the Kansas City offense is one that needs an extra playmaker all year long until the very end of the season. People are saying, yeah, they need another wide receiver. They got to get another playmaker in there. Got to get something to help open up the offense, take the workload off the shoulders of Kelsey and Hill, myself included. But down the stretch, and in this game included, you look at this team and you're like, oh, well, actually, maybe Mecole Hardman's fine. And, maybe Byron Pringle is fine as your number 2 as a wide receiver if you have Kelsey and Hill as your main 2 pass catchers. So, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of an interesting, and then if that is the case and they feel comfortable with these pass catchers, where do they pivot in the offseason? And then, leaving the Chiefs, talking about the Steelers, I mean, they had no shot. I mean, Big Ben, it's kind of crazy. You go back to that quote early in the week where he's like, yeah, nobody's really thinking we're going to win. Let's just go have fun, whatever. Did he give up on this game beforehand? I mean, I don't know. And it's disappointing as a Steelers fan, getting a win on primetime against the Browns and then beating the Ravens in Baltimore. If that's the best way for a Steelers quarterback to retire, that's the way to go out in a lot of ways. That or a Super Bowl. And then instead, you get those wins, and it's like, all right, cool. I got my, Kings, walk into the sunset. Instead, you have to come back, play another game in Kansas City, and not great conditions, probably not fun to play in, and get your tail whipped. Yeah, not ideal. So, yeah, Pittsburgh really had no shot in this game. I know it was scoreless in the first quarter. You get the defensive touchdown from T.J. Watt. That's great. But even as that's happening, myself, and I have to think a majority of people watching this game were like, yeah, but Kansas City's be all right. Don't try to get too cute with the snap to Hardman and the fumbled handoff, or snap to Williams, fumbled handoff to Hardman, however it went. But yeah, this was not a fun game to watch either. So Sunday was kind of disappointing in a lot of ways, other than that middle game. And then the final game of the weekend won this picture. Shout out to whoever the photographer was. I'll have to try to put credit down in the description. This picture goes hard. This thing is insane. Perfectly crisp. OBJ was fantastic in this game. I know he only had 5 catches for like 54 yards and a tutty, but for what they asked him to do, he was really good. And nice balance there with him and Cooper Kupp. But let's go ahead and jump into the takeaways. Clean game for Stafford. Didn't ask him to do a whole lot. 2 touchdowns, no picks, right? This was one of those games where, especially if the Cardinals' first half played out as it did, the one way for them to get back into it was to force Stafford into turnovers, and he didn't. So that's really, really good for this team. And if he can continue to be that decisive and surgical down the stretch of the playoffs, this team is as live as it gets in the NFL. And then the disappointing game for Kyler, a couple picks and like 134 yards passing, and it just wasn't really disappointing considering where we saw him at earlier this year, and maybe it's still lingering result from the injury he had down the stretch of the season. But this guy was playing like an MVP for the first half of the year, and we did not see MVP Kyler Murray in this game, and that's really disappointing for Cardinals fans. And you know what? I'll say it. If Mike McCarthy can lose his job in a playoff loss, why can't Cliff Kingsbury? Kingsbury at least has the the excuse of being able to say, yeah, I'm their play caller too, so it's a little harder to manage the game and be the offensive coordinator, basically. But I don't know. The offense doesn't look inspiring. I don't know if there's a better coaching option there or a better offensive fit for Kyler in this team, but I don't know. I'm still not impressed. And this seems to happen every year where the Cardinals start the year and they really impress you. And you think, okay, they're gonna be able to do it this year. And then, as the year goes on, game by game, it feels like they just lose that steam. And then you end up losing the first round 34-11 to a divisional rival. So maybe not the best matchup for the Cardinals. I would say not having DeAndre Hopkins played a factor in this game, but this was a tough loss for Arizona. But for the Rams, yeah, the offensive production from a lot of different players. Those weapons look legit. Not only Kupp and Beckham, but you get a big catch from Van Jefferson, 1 catch for 41 yards. Sonny Michel Cam Akers gets a 40-yard catch and run. And then even in the backfield, Akers, Michel, Darrell Henderson, they're looking good there. Tyler Higbee also had a pretty decent game as a tight end. So this team looks as advertised. We talked about, you have Stafford and you have all those weapons around him. This was a game that highlighted each and every one of them in their own way. And then the Rams defense really was stellar. And this sets up in a really interesting spot for the Bucs. If they don't have Wirfs, and that's Von Miller rushing from that side, or even if it's Leonard Floyd, that is going to be a huge difference in that game. And when I do my preview video on Thursday, hopefully I'll have a better idea of where Wirfs is at. He's in a boot right now. It's going to be a game-time decision, but that is a loss that could 100% cost the Buccaneers that game in my eyes. So that front four in specific for the Rams played fantastic. With the entire defense was stellar. And when we have Von Miller, Aaron Donald, and Leonard Floyd, those three, you should get good play out of that front four and that pass rush, and you did in this game, man. And Kyler Murray's an elusive guy, and the offensive line overall for Arizona hasn't been terrible. They play in a scheme that kind of minimizes the weakness that could be there on the offensive line, but it did not matter against this team. I mean, the Rams completely exploited that offensive line and showcased what that team really looks like as a unit, and it's really not that good. So credit to Cliff Kingsbury's system for making that offensive line look passable throughout the entire season, because the Rams exposed it as a not very good unit. But that's going to do it for my Super Wildcard Weekend review. Tell me what you think of the weekend and of my video down in the comment section. Love to have some conversations about the football and the weekend that we just saw. And hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It helped me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, want to see more football content, hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.